One of the things you mentioned there was about relationship building, and how can someone go about building that relationship with a complete stranger via email? I mean, what are your thoughts around starting that process?
To forward engineer a good relationship is very difficult, but to provide value from that, the relationship emerges.
You're listening to The Growth Booth, the show focused on achieving lifestyle freedom through online businesses. Whether you're looking for step-by-step strategies to start building an online business, simple game plans to grow your business, or proven lifestyle freedom frameworks, you are in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the thousands of listeners already in growth mode.
Aidan Booth here, welcome to The Growth Booth, episode 14, where today we're going to be talking about ways that you can make life-changing income from even just tiny, in fact, remarkably small audiences. And before I get to that, though, I want to give you a little bit more context. And I think when I look back to my online marketing career, one of the biggest mistakes that I made in the first couple of years was that I wasn't building an email list. And in hindsight, this is probably something that's cost me millions of dollars. And if I could say what the second biggest mistake is, or the second biggest thing that I did wrong, is when I eventually did start building an email list, my communication was terrible. I really sucked at it. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't get any good results as a result of that. But all of this changed, I want to say maybe probably over 10 years ago now, when I came across a method, or more an education from the special guests that I've got with me on the show today. And email marketing for me went from being like a distant afterthought to one of the main focuses. And my strategy went from sort of being one of a hobbyist to one of a big budget HBO show or a big budget Netflix show, and the results were amazing. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I sort of mean by that in a moment. So I'm a huge fan of the work done by Chaperon and Shawn, Twing, who are here with us here today, and that is because the results that I've got from implementing a lot of their ideas have resulted in hundreds of thousands of extra dollars in my pocket. So I think you can probably see why I am a huge fan of these guys and the education that they put out. And if you want to find out more about them, you can go to tinylittlebusinesses.com. And as always, we will have a link to all the important things in the show notes on thegrowthbooth.com. Remember, this is episode number 14. So with all of that said, Andre, Shawn, thank you guys so much for being here on the show. I think I owe you guys a dinner or something next time, or when we eventually meet in person. Great to have you here.
Or a beer.
A beer would be good as well.
We'll take beer.
We could do both. So yeah, thanks for being here, guys. I think anyone who's got an online business is going to have something going on, or should have something going on with email marketing. So I thought that could be a good place for us to start, because it's something that I think anyone could sort of get some results from. So why don't we dive into that? And one of the big questions I have for you is, with the development of social media, is email still the number one way for people, whether they've got an affiliate marketing business, an e-commerce business, a software business? Is email still the best way to be communicating with people, or what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, it certainly is for us. It's the center of our universe. And, I don't want to diminish social media, because TikTok and various social media channels are the center of the universe for other people. So I don't think this is this all that. I think everybody should really be using email. I'm slightly biased, but it is such a nice way to communicate with an audience in mass. I suppose TikTok and all the rest do similar things. You put out a message and it goes out to an audience, but the way that you can build relationships long term using email, I don't think there's anything that can rival that. Certainly in terms of ROI. Shawn's he's worked with many clients, so he could probably speak more to that, to the ROI side of it. But I think that's my big picture.
I mean, I ran prior to partnering with Andre, I ran a digital agency for 21 years, worked with 240-ish clients, managed somewhere north of $100 million in ad spend. And if I look across the 21 years and even more heavily weight the last 5 years of it, email never loses, never. I mean, it's all of the other things are sort of adjunct, and it's not to diminish them. It's not either or. But if you had to remove one thing from every strategy, the last thing you should remove is email. Always. I mean, it outperforms everything. And yes, there are going to be some rare examples where someone says, "But well, wait a minute, I'm a TikTok influencer," and okay, right. I mean, the exception proves the rule, but for the 999,000 other businesses,
Yeah.
email rules and will continue to rule.
We've seen this
That's reality.
in our businesses across the board as well. Speaking about TikTok, we finally set up some TikTok marketing in one of our e-commerce brands, and my partner in that told me about that, and it sort of, I mean, I had to go and open a TikTok account, and I just felt like, what am I doing here? But turns out it is an interesting sales channel. But again, like to your point there, Shawn, I mean, email is the thing that goes across the whole spectrum of the online marketing universe, and it's just proven itself time and time again. We haven't, we've maintained really good open rates, I think, over the years, and I think part of that is because we have really adopted a lot of the philosophy that you guys sort of teach, which is building up relationships. If someone is just starting out and they've got a very small email list, how many subscribers does someone need to be able to start making, I don't know, some tangible difference to their bottom line with a, I know that's a pretty open-ended question there, but to give some people some perspective, I mean, do they need tens of thousands of subscribers? I mean,
no, I mean, we call that how long is a piece of string question, right? I mean, who knows? But if you think about, we interviewed a gentleman who's in our audience. He's top of his field coach for cyclists. I mean, he's a PhD in, I don't know, exercise physiology or something, but he works with elite level cyclists. And there aren't millions of them in the world, but for him to start a business, he doesn't need 1,000. I mean, there probably aren't 1,000 people. I guess there probably are 1,000 elite cyclists, but his audience is not enormous. But what matters, and it's really it's the dimensions that we consider when we evaluate something. There are two dimensions, and it's not either or. One dimension's quantity, the other dimension's quality, right? So if you have a business where by email it's a very light footprint, you're not really engaging with your audience, then you need thousands of people on an email list to get a result. And that's really what the foundation of the original internet marketing was. The foundation was just volume, because traffic was really cheap. And when traffic is cheap, you can have a 0.5% conversion rate, and you can make a business out of it. And people did. The problem is traffic is no longer cheap. Traffic is incredibly expensive. Yet a lot of people haven't adapted their strategies to the new reality. So it becomes brute force. You need massive email lists because the signal to noise ratio is so small. And what we emphasize on is, if you're going to do the work to acquire somebody's attention, do the damn work and really get their attention, and be willing to not get the attention of people who probably aren't going to engage with you over a long period of time. Spend the time to focus on the qualitative side of the decision making. And when you overemphasize in relationships, that pays dividends over a much longer period of time. And that's the thing that people miss so much. And we talk about Dean Jackson's observations and the research he's shared a lot, which is, the summary of it is that Dean has evaluated a lot of his clients' data. Dean has access to a tremendous amount of data, and we've seen this reinforced by many, many others in our audience, where what Dean observed is that of the people who buy over a 2-year period, only 15% of people buy in the first 90 days. I mean, the moment and that's not like something we hope is true, we think is true, it might be true. It's truth. It's as true as gravity. Right? We say this a lot. You can argue with gravity, but when you jump off a building, gravity wins. So you can argue with the gravity of the internet. You can argue with like, oh no, I want to get somebody's attention right now, and I want to make the sale right now. But the reality is of the people who buy over a 2-year period from you, only 15% are going to buy in the first 90 days. And the game then, 4 times the opportunity exists after 90 days. And the moment people internalize that, everything in their business changes, because the emphasis changes from how many people can I get on my list to how well can I take care of the people who are in my audience? How much can I respect their attention? How much value can I give? Because it's going to pay off later. It's not going to pay off necessarily right now. It's a long answer to a short question. That's one of my favorite questions.
Yeah, well, I did ask you how long a piece of string was, so I'm glad we were able to get into some details there. The one thing that I've always often come back to is this whole concept of 1,000 true fans. If you've got 1,000 true fans, 1,000 raving subscribers who sort of hang on every word, I mean, that is more than enough to be able to build a really sizable business just on email marketing alone. And it would be, almost doesn't matter if it's affiliate marketing or e-commerce. If you just think about the numbers there for a second, 1,000 subscribers, if you could get each one of them to invest $100 in something that you're doing, and again, using the elite cyclists niche as an example here, I mean, it wouldn't be, in most niches you can find things that people are going to spend some money on. So I think the other really important thing you mentioned there was just making sure you are talking to a specific audience and not trying to please absolutely everyone. I mean, that's one of the fastest ways to lose sales, is by trying to please absolutely everyone versus having an absolutely sort of laser focused message. One thing I've seen you guys do a lot is if you're running a marketing email of some kind, is you might ask people to tell you if they're interested in hearing more about something. Could you share with the listeners here today, what is that? Why do you do it? And what's the benefit of doing something like that?
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we want to be respectful of people's attention, and it's something that is the holy grail. We always want to work to be as relevant as we can with everything, with every communication. And at the same time, we recognize that every single thing we have to share isn't going to be relevant to every single person on our email list all the time. So when you come to recognize that, then what we do becomes an easy thing to do, which is ask people to raise their hand if they're interested in a certain thing. So whenever we're doing any promotion, in fact, as we're getting ready to do a promotion next week, and we've sent out one of these emails that I'm talking about now. We sent out yesterday, which is we frame what's about to happen and this thing that we're going to promote, and then we just simply ask people if this is of interest to you, click this link to raise your hand, and then we'll add you to the segment, and you'll get to hear about it next week. And certain people raise their hand, and most people don't. And it's important to recognize that most people don't raise their hand, and that's okay, because we're respecting their attention.
And it's two things, right? It's we respect inattention, and we reward attention, and those are sort of two things. So the person who is interested right now and clicks and is added to an interest list, that person gets the squirts of dopamine that the following email campaign creates for them, and they're interested in it. But we don't. So they get a benefit. But the people who don't raise their hand, they don't know what they don't even know what happened. So we're not removing from their stores of attention. We're not in their inbox where it's like, here's more. And this is the conventional wisdom. It's like, well, email's cheap. It doesn't cost you any more money to send 10,000 emails than 1,000. So why would you only send to 1,000 people who raise their hand? Why not just send everybody everything all the time? But again, this gets back to we're looking at the wrong dimension of analysis when we do that. We're looking at the dimension of how much does it cost me in dollars to send an email, not how much does it cost my audience in attention to be bombarded with emails. And as soon as we change the dimension of analysis to let's focus our attention on what the audience is giving to us, even if it's slightly. they're giving us their attention, and when we're respectful of that, and I think this is really at the center of. I think Andre brought really two really interesting conceptual ideas to internet marketing that really have radically changed everything. This is one of them. This idea that there's a bridge between attention, that you have to cross over something. And if you don't, then you don't see things. And then the other is this idea of bringing the serialized narratives and the longer narrative arc to email marketing. Those two things, when you take those two things and add framing. So there's one more thing that I like, which is framing. When you put those are three legs of the stool that can make an email marketer effectively unstoppable. I mean, if you have value to share with the world and you understand framing, the narrative arc, and the bridge between attention and respect for inattention, that's it. That's the whole game right there. Everything else kind of details, but those are the three big levers.
Yeah. So, and just to let everyone know, I mean, if you're listening to this right now and you're hearing us talking about segmenting and, having someone raising their hand by clicking a link, these are actually quite simple things that any half-decent autoresponder is going to have. It doesn't matter if you're using, ConvertKit or Aweber or whatever. It doesn't matter at all. I mean, there are so many of them these days, they're a dime a dozen, but they do all allow you to segment audiences by having them click on links, and some make it easier than others, but it's something that you can easily do. But in terms of keeping someone's attention, so you've got someone on an email, in your email list, with all of the distraction around us in the world, and coming back to social media, and this is a huge one, what are some of the things that you can do to keep people opening emails in addition to just being relevant and giving them what they originally signed up for? Like, what are some other ideas that people can think about there?
Well, there's many tactics you can use. The one that's a bit more complex to unpack is the narrative arc across like a campaign of emails. So if you're promoting something and it's over 7 emails, you can have a narrative arc across that. But outside of that, you can use little things that create tension in people, and it's a good form of tension you can establish in people, that you can mention something and don't, without giving it all away, it pulls their attention forward, because there's something that that they don't know and they want to know. So it's a little game you can play. So that's one of the things, using open loops.
That was a huge takeaway for me when I started sort of learning a lot from you guys many years ago, being able to be consciously aware of how a lot of these big, Netflix series, HBO series, they keep you hooked on a cliffhanger kind of a thing, and how you can actually apply that to e-commerce emails, affiliate marketing emails, info product creation emails, SaaS company emails. You can do this really easily just by sort of planting unanswered questions. I had a website in the woodworking niche, must be about a decade ago, and believe it or not, that it's a very, very lucrative niche for starters, but I had this whole soap opera sequence, as you call them, a series of emails, and it was things like, it could be as simple as a one-liner in the PS section saying, in the next email, keep an eye out for the next email, we're going to talk about the golden ratio. And then a woodworker might be like, what the hell is the golden ratio? Obviously I'd hype it up and make it a little bit more exciting than that. But just to get the point across, people would be waiting for the next email to come, and then if an email didn't come in the next couple of days, they'd start emailing me and saying, hey, I haven't got the email about the golden ratio. Could you make sure that you've sent that out to me? And this is how, at that stage, and that email list back then, I mean, when I was getting started, like any email list, when you start off, it's got very few people, but even with a few hundred people on that email list, this was happening. And for me, that was when the penny dropped. I was like, oh, wow, this really is something to this open loop, closed loop stuff, and I understand a bit more about how that works now. One of the things you mentioned there was about relationship building, and how can someone go about building that relationship with a complete stranger via email? I mean, what are your thoughts around starting that process?
Well, the first thing you have to ask yourself, you have to switch the focus, right? Most business owners, marketers, human beings in general, the first question we're trying to figure out is, what's in it for me? Like, what do I need to happen to make this successful? What do I think is most valuable? What I do, I actually do every time we send an email, every time we create anything, literally every single time. I have a pencil, a scratch pad, like whatever's on my desk, and I ask myself, I write down one question: why does the audience care? Whatever the topic is, I'm about to write an email about X. Why does the audience care? And then what will often happen is I'll write something, and I'm like, why would they care about that? And then I write something else, and it sometimes it's two or three times. Sometimes I get really lucky; it's the first one, but most often it's the third, fourth, fifth, where by that point I'm frustrated with myself. I'm irritated. I generally get irritated with myself, where I'm like, what do you like? It's almost like, what are you talking about? And I write, and all of a sudden I write a sentence. I'm like, oh, that's why they care. That's what this is actually about. This is what this is going to do for them. And once I have that, then I know the value that I'm delivering on in that email or in that campaign or in that video, whatever it is. Now I know the actual thing that's valuable for them because I've taken the time to figure it out in advance. And that changes everything. And it may sound a little simplistic, and it can be. If you write down why does it matter and you write an answer and then you run with it, that's simplistic. Because most likely it's not the core visceral emotional thing that you're talking about. But if you hammer away at it a few times and ask yourself over again, why does that matter? Why does that matter? Why does that, to them, not to you? Why does that matter? Finally, something reveals itself and you realize, oh, that's what we're really doing here. And once that becomes the focus of everything that you do, the relationship is then, it's emergent, not deliberate. This is a hard thing. Andre and I are systems theorists, so we talk about emergent properties a lot versus deliberate activities. We don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but the lesson here is that to try to forward engineer a good relationship is very difficult, but to provide value from the perspective of the recipient and to focus solely on that as your guiding North Star, from that the relationship emerges. And it sounds like we're splitting hairs, but it's a very different. It's hard to go in. I mean, if you've ever hit it off with somebody, right? It wasn't deliberate. It's like, oh, because we went to this place at this time and we did these things and we talked about these things and ate this meal. No, it's that you put yourself in situations where you're interested in what the other person's talking about. You have shared interest, or you have whatever it is. Like, you put yourself in those situations, and then later you realize a relationship has emerged from that collection of opportunities. That's very similar to what we do. We focus so much on what the value our audience can get from us. We pour our hearts and souls into it, and then we observe over time that relationships have resulted from that activity.
I think that's a really good tip, and it's the kind of thing you could have a post-it note, pinned up next to the computer if you're doing emails, and just have on it there what's in it for them. And the other thing that we've always really tried to do, especially on initial interactions, is just over-deliver, massively over-deliver. In fact, go above and beyond, especially if it's something free that someone is getting, because that almost has them thinking, well, oh my God, if I'm getting all of this for free, imagine what there is on the inside. And it almost, I think when you really embrace a lot of the ideas that you're talking about here, you get to the point where you can forget about selling, because the selling just happens as a byproduct of delivering the value. So you're in this very sort of harmonious relationship, which is sort of a virtuoso cycle, where you're from good to better to better to better, and you're building all the while building out raving fans. Something else I wanted to get your thoughts on, we've spoken a little bit about segmenting and some of the value in doing that. What if someone isn't opening emails? What is the approach? You've got someone on your email list, you can see them on the email list, but for whatever reason they haven't been opening emails. What is sort of a tactical solution, or what are your thoughts around what to do in this instance?
Well, there's many things you can do. One is the one thing you can do is try and maintain a clean email list as clean as possible, recognizing that over time people's attention diminishes, and you can have different levels of attention, and your most engaged fans are going to stay engaged fans for a lot longer, sometimes forever. Whereas other people who are just tire kickers, for example, for lack of a better word, and their level of attention is just fleeting. So you can use the tools within your email marketing software and identify those people that aren't opening, and then you can do something. You can do a reactivation campaign if you wanted to. You can just delete them. That's something that I've done in the past. Just find everybody that hasn't opened an email in 6 months and hit delete. Yes, there are some people that can get caught up in that, which is why it's really better to have a campaign asking for people. We've noticed that you've not been opening our emails. Tracking isn't perfect, so if you just click this link, we're going to re-engage you. And if you're not interested in joining us anymore, that's cool. There's nothing you need to do.
Do you worry about the accuracy? I mean, you mentioned there that some people can sort of get caught in the crossfire if you're deleting subscribers, but I sometimes worry myself about the accuracy of whether or not someone is a cold subscriber. If they are appearing as someone in my autoresponder who hasn't opened or clicked on an email for a while. And the reason I say this is because I've taken a group of cold subscribers into the thousands, and I run them in a re-engagement campaign, or I just start sending them an email, even if it's not a re-engagement or reactivation campaign, and I'll get large percentage of people opening and clicking, and it gets me thinking, well, how were these people? Why were they in that cold segment in the first place? So the cold segment is the group of people that don't open an email for, it varies, but with ConvertKit, I think it's like 90 days. If someone doesn't open an email in 90 days, they're sort of tagged by the system as being a cold subscriber. So is this something that you worry about, or how do you sort of deal with that?
Well, I mean,
yeah, there's a great phrase. Go ahead, Andre. I've got one phrase.
You go first. I'll go second.
All right. So I would categorize this as making decisions on the wrong side of the decimal place, right? So we can make 0.1% decisions in our business, or we can make 10x decisions in our business. And re-engagement campaigns with audiences of cold subscribers, they're not 0.1% decisions, but they're not 10x decisions either. So if you think about you hear various analogies, like the analogy of a tree. You've got the roots, you've got the trunk of the tree. Like, these are the things that are most important, like the big issues, like segmentation, relevance of your messaging, creating value for your audience. Those are the roots. Those are the trunk. When you get to like re-engagement with people who don't seem to be opening, you're out at the front. You're out in the leaves at that point. So it's not that it's not something that you should think about, but it's something to think about in the proper context. That if it takes away from doing something else that's more important, don't worry about it. But if you have the time and the size of that audience is large enough, then re-engagement campaigns are a really easy solution to it. Or what you just mentioned is a great solution. Put everybody in a bucket. We send people a re-engagement campaign that says, hey, we notice you haven't been paying attention. We understand the tracking software is not 100%. If we got it wrong, click this link. You're all set. If you're no longer interested in 72 hours, we'll take you out of the system. You don't have to do anything. That's it. Like, we created it. It's done. We run it once in a while, and it does its work. But I wouldn't advise investing really any more time and energy than that into it, unless your list is hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and this segment is really important. But other than that, there's just not a lot of there.
Yeah.
All right, Andre, you were going to say something smarter than that.
Different ESPs deal with what it means to have an open show as an open. And with the ConvertKit, for example, if somebody clicks a link, that's counted as an open. So even if someone's tracking is turned off and images aren't showing, so it's not firing, this has been opened. If they click a link in that email, it'll then show it as opened. So that part does work, the clicking on links. The part that doesn't always work and is becoming less and less accurate, I guess, especially now with the Apple blocking, so many of the images showing. If you're just relying on opens, then it can be very inaccurate, I'm guessing. So for us, we're always trying to get people to click on links. So even if you're opening, passively reading emails, every so often, it makes sense that they click a link, right? Whether it's to raise a hand for something else or just something of interest, a video that we've shared, all of that requires somebody to click a link. So that's an important metric for us because we want engagement. We don't want, all of our subscribers just to be passive, passively reading stuff. And then there's also other things you can do, like try and get people to respond to emails, which just, it just adds to the crazy algorithms on the back end that decide, if your email ends up in someone's priority inbox or not, or ends up in the spam. We can't always control all of these variables, but we can do things like, just get people to respond to emails as much as possible, hit reply and let us know X, whatever. And, that then goes into our support desk software, and then we can interact with those prospects and customers in real time. And, all that stuff matters.
I think it's really important to keep mind or be aware of what the underlying sort of overarching, I guess you could say, strategy is that you're doing with the email marketing. I've seen something lately which has been really frustrating me quite a bit in my inbox, where I've got a couple of different people and they will change the from name. So I'm seeing that one day I'm getting an email from Joe. Okay, who's Joe? I don't know who Joe is. The next day I'm getting an email from Melissa. I'm like, who the heck is Melissa? When I dive a little bit closer, I see it's the same sender email, and it's the same company that's sending it, but they're just changing out and swapping over the from name, and it's like the most annoying thing ever. That's almost the opposite of everything that we're talking about here today about building an audience. If you're building an audience, if you're providing value, then your name is probably one of the biggest things that is going to get that email opened, whereas here it's having the opposite effect, and I'm like, unsubscribe. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that with people because I think it's sort of tied in there. Guys, I am really conscious of time here. I do have one more question I want to ask. Is there before that though, is there anything else that you want us to quickly sort of touch on here today? I think we've spoken, given a probably 30,000 foot overview of a few ideas and something we could talk about for many days. But is there anything else that you think is really important that we should include in this before we wrap up?
I mean, I'll point at one thing that we talk about a lot. I mentioned earlier, Andre and I are systems theorists, but it doesn't, what does that actually mean? That we've been, between the two of us, we've been in the game for 43 years. We're both dinosaurs, and one of that, we sort of reached this point where now it's a lot less about what we're adding, and it's a lot more about what we can take away. Like, can we find the sort of kernels of truth underneath everything else? And we spent some time about a year and a half ago really trying to distill internet marketing, digital marketing down to its essence. Like, what are the non-negotiables? And what we came to is that every business really needs three irreducible components: awareness, engagement, and conversion. Awareness is that, we can think of it in terms of traffic. Someone sees you, maybe they see Andre on TikTok or whatever. They become aware that you or what you have to offer exists. It could be paid, it could be organic, it could be whatever. It could be something like this, where people have never heard of us and they hear of us on a podcast and they think, oh, those guys seem weird enough, maybe I'll check them out. Like, that's awareness. Engagement is when they take a step toward you. Generally, lead gen is the sort of canonical idea of engagement, but it could be anything. It's when someone clicks through to your site, when they read a landing page, a sales page, they watch a YouTube video, whatever it is. And then, of course, conversion is when they become a paying customer. And no business can exist without all three of those components. I mean, you could have the best offer in the world with the most sophisticated checkout process and like all that, but if nobody knows about it, you don't have a business. If nobody ever takes a step towards you, you don't have a business. If Andre has anything
Yeah, I'll
more to
just
add to that.
throw a quickie in there. If somebody doesn't do email at all, it is never too late to start building your first prospect and then customer. But email is massively important. And from our perspective, there's no business that exists that should not be using email. And if you do use email, it's never too late to get better at that engagement and building that relationship with an audience.
Yeah, I think also it's never too late to start using email if you've had a business going for a while there. I see it especially in the e-commerce space where people sort of tend to discount it, but there's so much more that you can do. There's so much you can grow your business, even by just having the bare bones, the basics of an email marketing campaign built in there. So I think my big tips here today would be to think about the lifetime value and look at your customers through a longer lens, not through a simple transaction from one day to the next. If you don't have an autoresponder set up, then just go and set one up. You can get started for free with something like MailChimp, and there are dozens and dozens of them out there. We use ConvertKit a lot for a lot of our businesses. We use Klaviyo, we use Aweber. It really depends on what we're doing, but don't get overwhelmed by all of that. Just get any account to get started, and you can always change to something which is more specialized later. And create a simple email sequence. It doesn't have to be difficult. I really liked what you mentioned a moment ago, Shawn, and the word that came to mind was congruence. You want congruency between each element of the process and the system that you've got going there. So just be aware of this. Another thing that you mentioned a little bit earlier, Shawn or Andre, was just about keeping things really simple. So when we were talking about re-engagement or reactivation campaigns, this doesn't have to be something that you spend days and weeks agonizing over. It could be done in literally 5 minutes by exporting a list of people who haven't opened an email and sending them an email and see if they click on it. And you could literally do that in 5 minutes flat. So keeping things just as simple as humanly possible. I am conscious of the time. This is again something we could talk about, for hours or days on end. So hopefully I can have you guys back at some stage in the future. Really appreciate taking some time out of your day here. And as I say, the strategies and the ideas that you've been talking about here have absolutely added a lot of money to our businesses over the years. So it's great to be able to share some of them with the listeners. This is episode number 14. We will have show notes, show transcriptions, important outbound links as well, where you can find out lots more information at thegrowthbooth.com. Head over there and to show number 14 to see this, and hope to see you again on the next episode, which will be released in a week. That's all for us here today, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.